It was my grandson Tyler's 8th birthday party. The expansive living room of my daughter's suburban home buzzed with activity. Children racing across the hardwood floors, shrieking with delight, wrapping paper torn to shreds beneath their feet. The sugary scent of store-bought cake, mixing with the chorus of parents chatting over glasses of wine. I stood in the corner, watching as Tyler aimed his new water gun directly at my chest and pulled the trigger. The ice-cold water soaked through my silk blouse while everyone erupted in laughter. No one moved to help me. No one stopped smiling. That day, I made a decision that would silence their laughter forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I would finally tell them who actually owned the roof over their heads. I arrived at Rebecca's house 3 hours before the party was set to begin. The morning sun streamed through the bay windows of the 2-story colonial that I had purchased 16 years ago when my late husband's insurance policy paid out. Back then, Rebecca was a struggling single mother with a toddler and a mountain of student debt. "It's just until I get on my feet," she had promised. That temporary arrangement had somehow stretched into nearly 2 decades. The front door wasn't locked. It never was for me. I was expected to let myself in, especially on days when help was needed. From the entryway, I could hear Rebecca's voice, echoing from upstairs, the sharp professional tone she used for her real estate clients. "Of course the school district is excellent," she was saying. "My son goes there. I wouldn't settle for anything less." Her husband Greg's running shoes were strewn across the hallway, along with Tyler's baseball gear. I gathered them silently, arranging the shoes on the rack I had bought last Christmas, and carrying the sports equipment to the designated bin in the garage. These small acts of tidying had become so automatic that I no longer noticed doing them. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Last night's dinner plates were stacked haphazardly in the sink. Half-empty takeout containers cluttered the counter. The dishwasher was full of clean dishes no one had bothered to unload. I sighed and pulled on the rubber gloves I kept under the sink. My rubber gloves in my sink in my house. "Afternoon, Emily," Greg called as he sauntered into the kitchen, barely glancing up from his phone. "We're thinking about 40 people today. Rebecca ordered some platters, but they'll need to be picked up. The list is somewhere around here." He gestured vaguely at the cluttered countertop before grabbing a beer from the refrigerator and heading toward the back patio. I found the catering order receipt buried under a stack of mail. 53 items from Parkside Gourmet. Sandwiches, fruit platters, appetizers, specialty cupcakes, all scheduled for pickup, not delivery. The total made me wince, $647.82. The receipt was marked paid with Rebecca's business credit card. She never hesitated to spend lavishly for appearances. "Mom? Is that you?" Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled, designer sundress unwrinkled despite the chaos around her. "Thank goodness. Could you get started on the kitchen? The cleaners canceled last minute, and I have 3 virtual showings this afternoon." She didn't wait for a response before adding, "Oh, and Tyler wants those special lemonade popsicles you make. And can you pick up the catering order? Parkside's delivery driver called in sick." "I was thinking we could use real plates instead of plastic today," I suggested, keeping my voice light. "Less waste, and the good china would look nicer for photos." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly, as if I'd suggested something absurd. "Mom, there'll be 8 kids under 10 here. We're using disposables, the fancy bamboo ones at least." She glanced at the sink with a grimace. "And please make sure all this is cleared before people arrive. First impressions, you know." I knew all about first impressions. I had been a corporate event planner for 27 years before retiring to help with Tyler. Rebecca had inherited my eye for detail, but none of my willingness to handle the unglamorous preparation work. As Rebecca disappeared back upstairs, I began the methodical process of restoring order to the kitchen. I unloaded the dishwasher, rinsed the crusted plates in the sink, and wiped down every surface. I prepared homemade lemonade and poured it into popsicle molds before placing them in the freezer. I swept the floors, folded the throw blankets, and arranged fresh flowers in the vintage crystal vase that had been my mother's. While I worked, my mind drifted to the conversation I'd had with my financial advisor last week. "Mrs. Winters," he had said, looking at me over his reading glasses, "you've been supporting your daughter's household for 16 years. The property taxes alone are triple what you'd pay for a comfortable condo of your own. Have you considered making different arrangements for your future?" I hadn't told him about the other expenses: the private school tuition for Tyler, the family vacations I subsidized, the loans that were never repaid. I simply nodded and promised to think about it. The same promise I'd been making for years. Why? Phone buzzed with a text from my sister Margaret. "Don't forget our lunch tomorrow. Need to discuss the lawyer's findings." I quickly replied, "Still on. We'll fill you in after the party." Margaret had been urging me for years to formalize the housing arrangement with Rebecca. Last month, I'd finally agreed to have a lawyer review the situation. I was stirring the homemade frosting. Rebecca had insisted on a backup in case the catering desserts weren't Instagram-worthy, when Tyler thundered down the stairs and into the kitchen. "Grandma!" he shouted, hurling himself at me with the unbridled enthusiasm of a child who knows he is adored, his arms wrapped around my waist, face pressing into my apron. "Did you make the special popsicles? Dad said maybe you forgot." I smoothed his unruly, brown hair, so like his grandfather's had been. "They're in the freezer. They need another hour to set properly." His face fell momentarily before brightening again. "That's okay. Can I lick the frosting spoon instead?" I handed him the mixing spoon with a conspiratorial wink. Tyler had my sweet tooth and Rebecca's determination, a dangerous combination. "Mom says you're staying to help with the whole party," Tyler said between licks of chocolate frosting. "And for cleanup too. She says you're the best at getting stains out of the couch." "Is that what she says?" I kept my tone neutral, though something twisted in my chest. "Uh-huh. And Dad says you're better than those cleaning ladies anyway. Plus you're free." He delivered this assessment without malice, simply repeating what he'd heard, unaware of how the words landed. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the first guests. Tyler dropped the spoon into the sink and raced toward the front of the house, leaving me alone with the echo of his innocent revelation. I removed my apron, smoothed down my silk blouse, the pale blue one I'd purchased for my 70th birthday, celebration that Rebecca had been too busy to attend, and took a deep breath. As I did every time these small hurts accumulated, I reminded myself that family came first, that Tyler deserved a beautiful childhood, that Rebecca and Greg were just busy with their careers. But today, something felt different. Perhaps it was the lawyer's letter sitting in my purse, outlining my options as the legal owner of this house. Perhaps it was turning 70 last month, and realizing how many of my own dreams remained deferred. Or perhaps it was simply hearing my role in this family defined so clearly through the unfiltered words of an 8-year-old. I was the help, convenient, reliable, and free. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the sound of arriving guests, unaware that in just a few hours, this carefully maintained family dynamic would shatter completely. I hadn't always been the silent backbone of Rebecca's household. There was a time when I had my own thriving life, a career I'd built from scratch after Harold died unexpectedly when Rebecca was just 12. Insurance money only stretches so far when you're a 40-year-old widow with a daughter entering her teenage years. I'd leveraged my organizational skills and attention to detail into a position with Marshall Events, starting as an assistant and working my way up to senior event coordinator within 5 years. Corporate galas, product launches, charity fundraisers, I orchestrated them all with precision and flair. My boss, Diane Marshall, often said I had a gift for making powerful people feel taken care of without feeling managed. Emily Winters, clients would say, makes the impossible look effortless. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What no one saw were the 16-hour days, the weekends sacrificed, the school events I missed while ensuring other people's celebrations went perfectly. Rebecca noticed, though. Every missed dinner, every rescheduled outing, every time I sent. Her grandmother as a stand-in at school functions, she kept a mental tally. "You're never there when it matters," she told me during one particularly bitter argument her senior year of high school. "You care more about making sure some tech CEO's product launch has the right lighting than being at my debate championship." The guilt was a constant companion. I tried to compensate with material things. The latest clothes, a car for her 16th birthday, the promise of college without student loans. The more I gave, the more Rebecca seemed to expect, as if each gift was merely the minimum requirement for maternal adequacy. When Rebecca met Greg in college, I was hopeful. He was studying business management, played lacrosse, came from a good family, as my mother would have said. They married a year after graduation, just as my event planning business, which I'd started after leaving Marshall Events, was taking off. For the first time in years, I felt I could breathe. Rebecca had someone else to lean on. Then came the frantic call at 2 a.m. Rebecca was sobbing, incoherent. Greg had lost his job. They'd fallen behind on rent. She was 3 months pregnant. Could they move in with me? Just until the baby comes? My 2-bedroom condo wouldn't accommodate a young family. Without hesitation, I liquidated my retirement portfolio and purchased the colonial house in Oakwood Estates, a good neighborhood with excellent schools, room for the baby to grow, and space for my event planning business in the finished basement. The plan was simple. They would live there rent-free until Greg found work and Rebecca finished her real estate certification. I would move in temporarily to help with the baby, then return to my condo once they were on their feet. Tyler's birth changed everything. Rebecca struggled with postpartum depression. Greg's new job involved frequent travel. I extended my leave of absence from my business to 3 months, then 6, then indefinitely. Clients called, asking when I would return. Eventually, they stopped calling. "Mom, I can't do this without you," Rebecca would say, eyes rimmed with exhaustion as she handed me the crying infant. "You're so much better with him than I am." It was true. I had a knack for calming Tyler, for anticipating his needs before he could voice them. What began as emergency assistance evolved into a permanent arrangement. I became Grammy M, who lived in the garden-level suite, always available for childcare, cooking, and household management. The years blurred together in a parade of Tyler's milestones, first steps, first words, first day of school. I treasured each one, photographing and documenting them in leather-bound albums that lined my bookshelf. In many ways, I was experiencing the full-time parenthood I'd missed with Rebecca, pouring into Tyler the attention my career had once demanded. Meanwhile, Rebecca's real estate business flourished. She had my eye for detail and her father's charm. Powerful combination in sales. Greg eventually settled into a management position with a sportswear company, his frequent business trips becoming a normal part of our family rhythm. They were building their careers, and I was building their safety net. There were moments when I considered reclaiming my independence. When Tyler started kindergarten, I drafted a business plan to revive my event planning on a smaller scale. The night before I planned to discuss it with Rebecca, she announced her nomination for the Regional Realtor of the Year award. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mom," she said, raising her wine glass. "You're my secret weapon." The business plan remained in my desk drawer, eventually buried under household receipts and Tyler's school projects. As the years passed, the arrangement calcified into tradition. Holidays were always hosted at Rebecca and Greg's house, though I did the cooking, decorating, and cleanup. When friends or colleagues visited, I would discreetly disappear to my suite, emerging only to refill drinks or bring out fresh appetizers. I became a fixture that blended into the background, essential but unremarkable, like the foundation of the house itself. Only my sister Margaret saw the imbalance clearly. Do they realize you're not the housekeeper?" she asked during one of our monthly lunches. After I explained why I couldn't join her Mediterranean cruise, Tyler had a series of soccer tournaments, and Rebecca needed me to manage the house. During her busy season, "They're building their futures," I defended. "This is what family does." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Which reminds me, have you ever actually transferred the house deed to Rebecca's name?" I hadn't. Despite numerous conversations over the years about making it official, something had always held me back. Perhaps it was the attorney who had handled Harold's estate, his words echoing each time I considered signing over the property. "Mrs. Winters, assets are leverage. Once given away, they can't protect you." So the house remained in my name, the property taxes auto-drafted from my account, the insurance policy listing me as the primary resident and owner. It was the one thread of control I maintained, though I rarely acknowledged it, even to myself. Last month, as my 70th birthday approached, Margaret insisted on taking me to consult with her estate lawyer. "Just to make sure everything's in order," she said. But I knew her real concern, that I would leave this world having given everything and secured nothing. The lawyer, a practical woman in her 50s named Joanne Levy, had reviewed my situation with professional detachment but obvious concern. "Mrs. Winters, you've created a precarious arrangement," she explained, pushing a document across the desk. "You own a valuable property that another family has treated as their own for 16 years. Without formal agreements, you're vulnerable, and so are they." The document outlined my options. Formalize a lease agreement, transfer ownership with continued right of residence, sell the property and purchase something more suitable for my needs, or maintain the status quo with added legal protections. "I need to think about it," I told her, tucking the document into my purse. "Don't think too long," Joanne advised. "Unspoken arrangements have a way of becoming problematic when finally addressed." That document now sat in my handbag, its corners, slightly worn from the many times I'd taken it out, read it through, and returned it without action. Each option required a conversation, the very conversation I'd been avoiding for 16 years. A conversation about boundaries, about appreciation, about who precisely owned the beautiful colonial house where Tyler was now celebrating his 8th birthday. A conversation I never expected would be prompted by a child's water gun and the sound of my own family laughing at my humiliation. What no one in my family knew, not Rebecca, not Greg, and certainly not Tyler, was that I had been quietly building something of my own over the past 3 years. It started with an accidental meeting at the community center where I volunteered on Tuesday mornings. I was arranging flowers for the reception desk when Elaine Moretti, a former client from my event planning days, walked through the door. She stopped mid-stride, staring at me with a mixture of surprise and delight. "Emily Winters? Is that really you?" I smoothed my hands over my cardigan, suddenly conscious of how different I must look from the polished professional she remembered. "Elaine, how wonderful to see you." She embraced me warmly, then stepped back with searching eyes. "Where have you been hiding? After you coordinated my daughter's wedding, I tried to hire you for our company's 25th anniversary, but you'd completely disappeared." I gave the explanation I'd rehearsed over the years. Family obligations, a need for a slower pace, the desire to focus on my grandson. The practiced words flowed easily, though they tasted stale on my tongue. Elaine wasn't satisfied. "But your work was exceptional. I've never found anyone with your attention to detail and ability to make every guest feel special." She paused, then added, "We're launching a new luxury senior living complex, Monarch Heights. The developer wants someone to coordinate lifestyle programming and social events. It's part-time, but I'm not looking for work," I said automatically, the reflex of someone who had convinced herself her value lay elsewhere. But Elaine pressed. a business card into my hand anyway. Just think about it. We need someone who understands our demographic, someone with taste, discretion, and warmth. I tucked the card into my pocket, certain I would never call. Yet that night, after preparing dinner for Rebecca's family, cleaning the kitchen, and retreating to my suite, I found myself staring at the embossed card in the lamplight. The next morning, I called Elaine from the grocery store parking lot, speaking in hushed tones as if Rebecca might somehow overhear me from miles away. "I'd like to learn more about the position," I said, heart racing with a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. 2 days later, I met with Elaine and Stephen Zhao, the property developer, at the construction site of Monarch Heights. The complex was impressive. 5 buildings arranged around landscaped gardens, a community center with a demonstration kitchen, art studios, and a small performance space. Stephen explained his vision for a retirement community that felt nothing like a retirement community, a place where people came to begin a new chapter rather than quietly close the book. "We're not selling apartments," he said, gesturing to the sun-filled space that would become the central atrium. "We're selling a lifestyle, one with dignity, engagement, and purpose." I found myself nodding, something resonating deep within me. At his words, dignity, engagement, purpose. How long had it been since I'd felt those things? "We'd like you to start as our lifestyle director," Stephen concluded. "Part-time to begin with, just 3 days a week. The property opens in 18 months, which gives you time to develop programming while we complete construction." I hesitated. "I have family commitments." "Which is precisely why you're perfect for this role," Elaine interjected. "You understand the delicate balance our residents will be navigating, being there for family while creating space for themselves." I accepted the position that day, with one condition. My employment would remain confidential until I was ready to tell my family. Stephen and Elaine agreed, though they seemed puzzled by the request. And so began my secret professional renaissance. 3 days a week, while Rebecca believed I was at my book club, volunteer work, or running extended errands, I drove to the Monarch Heights offices in the neighboring town of Glendale. I designed social calendars, recruited local artists and educators for residency programs, planned the grand opening gala. My ideas flowed easily, each one affirmed and built upon by a team that valued my experience. More surprising than the joy of working again was the financial compensation. The salary was generous, far more than I had expected for part-time work. With minimal living expenses, my suite in Rebecca's house required little upkeep and my needs were modest. I found myself with a growing bank account for the first time in decades. 6 months into my work at Monarch Heights, Stephen approached me after a planning meeting. "Emily, you seem to have a particular affinity for Unit C307, he observed with a knowing smile. It was true. During tours of the construction site, I was repeatedly drawn to this particular apartment. A corner unit on the 3rd floor with eastern exposure, a balcony overlooking the gardens, and enough space for a small home office. I had caught myself imagining my books on its shelves, my photographs on its walls. "It's a lovely space," I admitted. "It's still available," Stephen said casually. "The pre-construction pricing ends next month." That evening, I sat in my garden-level suite, reviewing my finances with trembling hands. Between my savings, the income from my new position, and a modest investment portfolio I'd maintained from the insurance money after Harold's death, I could afford the down payment. The monthly fees were within my budget, especially considering the salary increase Stephen had already discussed for when the property opened. I signed the purchase agreement the following week, becoming the future owner of Unit C307 at Monarch Heights, my new home, my fresh start. The contract and brochures remained hidden in a locked file box in my closet, beneath winter sweaters Rebecca never bothered to borrow. Each night I would sometimes take them out, running my fingers over the glossy images of sunlit rooms and community spaces. Sometimes I'd unfold the floor plan of C307, imagining the furniture arrangement, the morning light streaming through the east-facing windows. For the first time in 16 years, I had a future that was entirely my own, a secret path to independence that no one could interrupt, minimize, or appropriate. As Monarch Heights neared completion, I found myself growing more confident, less willing to be overlooked or taken for granted. Small rebellions emerged. I declined last-minute babysitting requests, enrolled in a watercolor class on Wednesday evenings, bought myself a new car to replace the 10-year-old sedan that Rebecca often criticized as embarrassing. "You're different." "Lately," Margaret observed during one of our lunches, "there's a spark I haven't seen in years." I smiled mysteriously. "Maybe I'm finally waking up." The grand opening of Monarch Heights was scheduled for November 15th, just 3 months away. I had already begun quietly packing, sorting through decades of possessions, deciding what would come with me to my new life and what would remain behind. The movers were booked. The deposit for C307 was paid in full. All that remained was to tell my family, a conversation I had rehearsed countless times but never found the courage to initiate. I had decided to wait until after Tyler's birthday, not wanting to overshadow his celebration with what would surely be a difficult family discussion. But as I stood in Rebecca's kitchen, my kitchen, in truth, preparing for a party where I was simultaneously essential and invisible, I wondered if I had waited too long, if the patterns were too deeply established to break without shattering everything around them. The lawyer's document in my purse and the Monarch Heights keys in my future felt like twin lifelines, pulling me toward a shore I had long ago stopped, believing I would reach. All I needed was the courage to swim toward them, even if it meant leaving behind the familiar weight that had kept me anchored in place for so long. The party was in full swing by 3 o'clock. The living room and backyard teemed with children in party hats and sugar-high smiles, while clusters of adults gathered around the kitchen island and patio, balancing small plates and wine glasses. I moved through the spaces with practiced efficiency, refilling platters, collecting discarded napkins, ensuring the ice bucket remained full. Rebecca was in her element, holding court among the neighborhood mothers with animated stories about her latest luxury property listing. "The owners are asking $4.2 million, but between us, they'll take 3.8, she confided, her voice pitched to sound exclusive, yet just loud enough to be overheard. "I've already got a tech executive from San Francisco flying in next week." Greg manned the grill, spatula in one hand, beer in the other, surrounded by fathers discussing youth sports leagues and property taxes. His laugh carried across the yard. That same booming laugh that had first attracted Rebecca at a college party 20 years ago. No one seemed to notice that I was the one who had marinated the chicken, prepared the side dishes, set up the buffet table, and would ultimately clean everything once the party ended. I had become like the heating system or the plumbing, noticed only in my absence or malfunction. Tyler and his friends had migrated to the side yard where water guns and balloons had been set up for a supervised water battle. I watched from the kitchen window as they chased each other, shrieking with the unique delight of children permitted to make a mess. "Emily, the Hendersons were just asking about your famous deviled eggs," Rebecca's voice interrupted my thoughts. She stood in the doorway with a couple I recognized as the parents of Tyler's best friend. "I told them you guard that recipe like it's a state secret." I smiled politely, the practiced expression of someone used to being objectified through her domestic contributions. "It's just a pinch of smoked paprika that makes the difference," I offered, already moving toward the refrigerator to replenish the empty platter. "Mom makes the best everything," Rebecca continued as if I weren't present. "She's like our personal Martha Stewart minus the prison sentence." She laughed, and the Hendersons joined in obligingly. "I seriously don't know what we'd do without her. Probably starve or live in squalor." "You're so lucky to have family help," Mrs. Henderson said. "We have to pay our housekeeper a fortune, and she still doesn't do half of what your mother seems to manage." Rebecca nodded solemnly. "Trust me, I know how blessed we are. Mom's always been happiest taking care of everyone else. It's her love language. I felt something shift inside me, a subtle tectonic plate movement beneath the placid surface I maintained. How convenient to frame my constant service as a personal preference rather than the expectation it had become. I carried the refilled egg platter to the dining room buffet, aware of a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Outside, Tyler's water battle had escalated, the children now thoroughly soaked and mud-splattered. I made a mental note to gather towels and prepare the laundry room for the inevitable cleanup. Just then, the back door burst open, and Tyler ran in with several friends trailing behind him. "Mom, the water balloons are all gone," he announced, dripping puddles onto the hardwood floor I had polished that morning. Rebecca frowned. "Tyler, you're making a mess. Take your wet shoes off, please." "But we need more water balloons," he protested, still firmly planted on the hand-finished oak. "Ask your grandmother," Rebecca said dismissively, already turning back to her conversation with the Hendersons. "She knows where everything is." Tyler spun toward me, eyes wide with excitement, oblivious to the dynamics playing out among the adults. "Grandma, can you fill more water balloons? Please? We used all the ones Dad bought." I nodded, setting down my serving tray. "Let me get some towels for the floor first." "We don't need towels. We need balloons," Tyler interrupted, bouncing, on his heels and creating more puddles. "Dad said you wouldn't mind doing it." I glanced toward the patio where Greg was still holding court, another beer in hand. Of course he wouldn't mind. He wasn't the one filling balloons or mopping floors. "Tyler, floor first, then balloons," I said firmly, heading toward the laundry. Room for towels. By the time I returned, Rebecca had disappeared back to her social circle and Tyler was nowhere to be seen. I knelt to mop up the puddles, my knees protesting against the hard floor. As I worked, I heard the back door slam again, followed by the sound of running feet. "Grandma! Look what I found!" I turned to see Tyler standing in the doorway, grinning, triumphantly and holding his new Super Soaker XL, the top-tier water gun Greg had insisted on buying despite Rebecca's concerns about the price. Before I could respond, Tyler aimed the oversized blue and orange plastic weapon directly at me and pulled the trigger. The stream hit me square in the chest, soaking my silk blouse and splattering up to my face. The water was ice-cold, shocking, against my skin. I gasped, more from surprise than discomfort, dropping the towels as I instinctively raised my hands to shield myself. "Tyler!" I exclaimed, water dripping from my chin onto my now ruined blouse. Instead of apologizing, Tyler doubled over in laughter, clearly delighted by his successful sneak attack. The sound drew attention from the nearby adults, who turned to observe the scene. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening briefly before her lips curved into an amused smile. "Oh, Tyler, you got Grandma!" She laughed, making no move to reprimand him or help me. Greg's voice boomed from behind her. "Nice shot, buddy! Right on target!" He high-fived his son, both of them grinning widely. Within seconds, the incident had become a spectacle. Other parents chuckled, children gathered to stare, and someone, I believe it was Greg's brother Michael, had the presence of mind to capture the moment on his phone, the camera flash adding a final touch of humiliation to the scene. "Mom, you should see your face." Rebecca was practically doubled over now, tears of mirth gathering in the corners of her eyes. "You look like a drowned cat." The laughter crescendoed around me. Adult voices, children's giggles, all blending into a symphony of amusement at my expense. I stood frozen, water dripping onto the floor I had so carefully maintained, my silk blouse clinging uncomfortably to my skin, my carefully styled hair now plastered to my forehead. Not a single person moved to help me. Not one voice suggested, "Tyler, apologize." Not one hand offered a towel. Instead, Greg called out, "Hey, Tyler, I think Grandma needs to cool off even more." He winked at his son, who immediately raised the water gun again. Something snapped inside me, a tether that had kept me bound to this role, this house, this arrangement for 16 years. Without a word, I turned and walked from the room, leaving wet footprints across the polished floor. Behind me, the laughter continued, now tinged with confused murmurs. "Mom?" Rebecca called, finally registering that something wasn't right. "Mom, it was just a joke." I didn't respond. I continued walking, straight through the living room past startled guests, down the hallway to my suite. Inside, I locked the door behind me, stripped off my soaking clothes, and stood under the shower's hot spray, letting the water mingle with tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. As steam filled the bathroom, clarity filled my mind. The lawyer's document was no longer an option to consider. It was an imperative to act upon. The Monarch Heights apartment wasn't just a future possibility. It was my imminent reality. Most importantly, the colonial house with its gleaming hardwood, floors and perfectly manicured lawn wasn't Rebecca and Greg's house, as everyone believed. It was mine. Every square foot, every shingle, every foundation stone belonged to me, and it was time they knew it. I emerged from my suite 40 minutes later, hair dried, makeup refreshed, and dressed in a crisp linen pantsuit I'd purchased for my Monarch Heights interviews but had never worn in this house. The pale sage color brightened my complexion and complemented my silver hair, which I'd left loose around my shoulders rather than in my usual practical bun. I'd also put on the pearl earrings Harold had given me for our 20th anniversary. Small, acts of armor for what I knew would be a difficult confrontation. As I walked back toward the main part of the house, I heard unfamiliar laughter coming from the kitchen. A woman's voice, melodic and confident, punctuated by Greg's appreciative chuckles and Rebecca's animated responses. The party sounds had diminished somewhat. Presumably, some guests had already departed. I paused in the hallway, taking a steadying breath before turning the corner into the kitchen. The scene that greeted me sent a jolt of déjà vu through my body, so familiar yet fundamentally wrong, like walking into your own home to find the furniture rearranged. A woman I didn't recognize stood at my kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, expertly piping frosting onto cupcakes while chatting animatedly with Rebecca. She was perhaps 50, with a stylish, asymmetrical bob of chestnut hair streaked with caramel highlights, designer glasses perched on her nose, and an expensive-looking watch glinting on her wrist. A flower smudge decorated her cheek, giving her an endearing, approachable quality, despite her obvious polish. "The secret is adding a touch of lavender honey," she was saying, gracefully swirling the piping bag. "It creates depth without overwhelming. The vanilla—" Rebecca was watching with rapt attention, her expression a mix of admiration and delight I rarely saw directed at my own culinary efforts. Greg leaned against the counter, beer in hand, nodding appreciatively as the woman completed another perfect cupcake. Tyler sat at the breakfast bar, legs swinging, face still flushed from outdoor play, but now cleaned up and dry. "They look awesome. Ms. Vivian," he declared, eyeing the growing display of beautifully decorated treats. "Ms. Vivian," I repeated softly, the name escaping my lips before I could catch it. 4 heads swiveled in my direction. Tyler's face brightened. "Grandma! Ms. Vivian is making the best cupcakes ever, even better than the store ones." Rebecca straightened, something flashing across her face. Embarrassment? Guilt? Before her real estate agent's smile slid into place. "Mom, you're back. You look different." Her eyes swept over my outfit with barely concealed surprise. "I was going to check on you, but you were in the shower, and then Vivian offered to help with dessert since the catering cupcakes got knocked over." "Complete disaster," Greg added cheerfully. "That's what happens when you let 8-year-olds run a party, right?" But Vivian saved the day. The woman, Vivian, wiped her hands on a dish towel and stepped forward, extending her hand with a warm smile. "You must be Emily. I've heard so much about you from Rebecca. I'm Vivian Chen. We work together at Prestige Realty. I hope you don't mind me invading your kitchen. I took her hand automatically, noting her firm grip and the genuine warmth in her hazel eyes. There was nothing inherently threatening about her. Indeed, she seemed perfectly pleasant, yet I felt distinctly unsettled. Not my kitchen, I said quietly. Rebecca's kitchen. An awkward silence fell. Vivian's smile faltered slightly, her eyes darting between Rebecca and me, sensing undercurrents she couldn't possibly understand. Rebecca laughed too brightly. Mom's being modest. She practically runs this place. Nothing would function without her. She gestured toward the immaculate countertops. Speaking of which, thank you for cleaning up earlier. The water incident. The water incident, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. Is that what we're calling it? Greg cleared his throat. Hey, Em, no harm done, right? Kids will be kids. Tyler, didn't you have something to say to Grandma? Tyler squirmed slightly on his stool. Sorry for getting you wet, Grandma, he recited, with the mechanical tone of a child who's been instructed rather than one who genuinely understands his transgression. Thank you, Tyler, I acknowledged, then turned back to the adults. I see you managed without me. Oh, we were in a complete panic when those catering cupcakes tipped over, Vivian interjected good-naturedly. Tyler was devastated about his birthday dessert. I just happened to mention I used to run a bakery before getting into real estate, and Rebecca practically dragged me to the kitchen. She laughed lightly. I always keep emergency baking supplies in my car, occupational hazard from my previous life. Vivian is amazing, Rebecca gushed. Not just the best listing agent in our office, but apparently a secret pastry chef, too. And wait until you taste these, Mom. They're incredible. Salted caramel with vanilla bean frosting, Vivian explained. My signature recipe. I nodded politely, the realization dawning that I was witnessing my own replacement in real time. Here was a woman close to my age but seemingly worlds apart. Professional, sophisticated, talented, and most importantly, treated with respect rather than as a convenient household appliance. They do look wonderful, I admitted, because they did. Each cupcake was a small work of art, topped with a perfect swirl of buttercream and a delicate caramel drizzle. They made my traditional vanilla pudding seem pedestrian by comparison. Tyler grabbed one eagerly. Ms. Vivian said she'll teach me how to make them. She says I'm a natural baker. Is that so? I kept my voice level, though something twisted painfully in my chest. Baking with Tyler had been our special activity since he was old enough to stand. On a step stool and stir batter. Those Saturday mornings, flour-dusted and laughter-filled, were among my most treasured memories. Vivian's son is grown now, in college, right? Rebecca looked to Vivian for confirmation, receiving a nod. She said she misses having a kitchen helper, and Tyler volunteered immediately. I see. I didn't trust myself to say more. Greg, oblivious to the emotional undertow, patted his stomach. If these taste half as good as they look, we might have to make Vivian an honorary family member. He winked at her. Rebecca's already trying to convince her to join us for Thanksgiving. Oh, stop, Vivian laughed, swatting him playfully with the dish towel. You barely know me. Nonsense, Rebecca insisted. You fit right in. Besides, Mom always says there's room for one more at our table. Does she? I arched an eyebrow. How generous of me. Finally, Rebecca seemed to register my discomfort. She gave me a questioning look before turning back to Vivian. Speaking of fitting in, did you bring those listing photos of the lakeside property? The ones we were discussing earlier? In my portfolio, in the car, Vivian replied. I can grab them before I head out. Perfect. Mom, you have to see this gorgeous lake house Vivian just listed. 3 acres, private dock, guest cottage. It's spectacular. Rebecca's enthusiasm seemed forced now, her words rushing together as she attempted to normalize the situation. Actually, Greg interjected, Vivian was telling us earlier about her empty nest adventures. She's been taking culinary tours of Italy, learning regional cooking techniques. You two should compare notes since you both love to cook. I managed a thin smile. How lovely. Mom was never much for travel, Rebecca explained to Vivian. She prefers being home, keeping things running smoothly for everyone. Right, Mom? The presumption in her tone. The casual way she defined me to a stranger, reducing decades of sacrificed dreams to a personality preference, was the final straw. Actually, I said, my voice stronger than I expected, I've been considering Italy myself, the Tuscany region specifically. It wasn't entirely untrue. Monarch Heights had an Italian cooking series planned for the spring curriculum, and I'd been researching authenticity. Rebecca laughed, the sound sharp with disbelief. Mom, you get nervous driving to the next county. Since when are you interested? In international travel? People change, I replied simply. Or perhaps they just reveal parts of themselves that were always there, once they're given the space to exist. An uncomfortable silence fell. Vivian, sensing the tension, began gathering her baking supplies. I should probably head out. Still, have a few appointments this afternoon. No, don't leave on my account, I said. I just came to get my purse. I have an appointment myself. Rebecca frowned. Appointment? You didn't mention anything this morning. Didn't I? Must have slipped my mind with all the party preparations. I walked to the hook by the door where my handbag hung next to the set of house keys I'd used for 16 years. Tyler, happy birthday again. The cupcakes look wonderful. As I turned to leave, Rebecca followed me into the hallway, her voice lowered. Mom, what's going on? Are you upset about the water gun thing? It was just a silly accident. I paused, studying my daughter's face. The face I had memorized from her first breath, had watched mature from round-cheeked innocence to sharp-featured ambition. I searched for the little girl who once reached for my hand instinctively, who once believed I could fix anything broken. No accident, I corrected softly. A choice. One of many made in this house without consideration for me. Her expression hardened. You're overreacting. It was just water. And why are you dressed like that? Where could you possibly need to go looking like you're heading to a business meeting? The condescension in her tone crystallized something within. Me. The certainty that I had made the right decision, that Monarch Heights wasn't just an option, but a necessity. I suppose you'll find out soon enough, I replied, then walked out the front door, letting it close firmly behind me. I didn't go far, just to Margaret's house 20 minutes away. She answered the door in gardening clothes, soil smudging her knees, surprise evident on her face. Em, isn't it Tyler's birthday party today? She ushered me inside, immediately registering my expression. What happened? The story spilled out. In fragments, the water gun, the laughter, Vivian's appearance in my kitchen. Margaret listened, her mouth tightening into a thin line as I described the scene. So, they've already found your replacement, she said when I finished. Classic. They haven't even waited for you to leave before moving someone else into your role. She seems nice enough, I admitted, collapsing onto Margaret's sofa. Accomplished. Respected. Everything I used to be before I became the family doormat. Margaret disappeared into the kitchen, returning with 2 glasses of wine. Here. You look like you need this more than I need my wait until 5 o'clock rule. She sat beside me, tucking one leg beneath her. What are you going to do? I took a long sip before answering. I've made a decision about the house. Finally, Margaret exhaled. Please tell me you're not signing it over to them. No. I reached for my purse, extracting the lawyer's document. I'm going with option 3. I'm selling it. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. Selling? Where will you go? That's when I told her everything. About Monarch Heights, my secret position, the apartment I'd purchased, the plans I'd been making in silence for months. Her expression shifted from shock to delight as I spoke. Emily Winters, you dark horse. She laughed, raising her glass in a toast. All this time I thought you were just enduring, and here you've been plotting a magnificent escape. Not an escape, I corrected. A reclamation. Margaret sobered. They're not going to take this well, especially the part about selling the house. I know. I drained my glass. But it's time. I've already scheduled a meeting with Joanne Levy for Monday to start the process. My phone buzzed insistently. Rebecca, calling for the third time since I'd left. I silenced it again. You'll have to tell them eventually, Margaret pointed out. I will. Tonight, once I've had time to compose myself. I stood, straightening my linen jacket. Would you mind driving me back? I left my car there. I wasn't thinking clearly when I left. Margaret squeezed my hand. Of course, and Em, I'm proud of you. By the time we returned to the colonial house, the party appeared to be over. Only a few cars remained in the driveway. Greg's SUV, Rebecca's luxury sedan, and a sleek silver Audi I didn't recognize, presumably Vivian's. Margaret pulled up behind. My modest Toyota. Want me to come in with you? She offered. I shook my head. This is something I need to do alone. But thank you. Call me after, no matter how late. I nodded, then walked up the pathway to the front door. Out of habit, I nearly used my key, then stopped myself. This time, I rang the doorbell like a visitor. Rebecca answered, her expression morphing from annoyance to relief. Mom, where have you been? We've been worried sick. You just disappeared without telling anyone. May I come in? I interrupted calmly. She blinked, startled by my tone. Of course you can come in. It's your home. Is it? I stepped past her into the foyer. The house was surprisingly tidy given the party's aftermath. Someone had cleaned up, probably Vivian from the looks of things. Rebecca followed me, confusion creasing her brow. What's that supposed to mean? Mom, what's going on with you today? I heard voices from the kitchen, Greg's baritone and Vivian's melodic laugh. The sound propelled me forward. I walked directly to the kitchen, Rebecca trailing behind. Greg, Tyler, and Vivian sat at the island, playing a board game spread across the marble countertop. Vivian was demonstrating something to Tyler, her hands animated, his eyes focused on her movements with rapt attention. They looked comfortable together, like old friends rather than new acquaintances. They all looked up as I entered. Tyler jumped off his stool. Grandma, you're back. Ms. Vivian showed me how to play chess. She says I'm a natural strategist. Chess. Another activity that had once been ours. Harold had taught me. I had taught Rebecca, and I had been slowly teaching Tyler on quiet Sunday afternoons. That's wonderful, Tyler, I managed. Greg stood. Where'd you run off to? Beck was about to send out a search party. Vivian gathered her things, obviously sensing tension. I should go. Tyler, remember what I said about protecting your queen. Rebecca, I'll email you those listing photos. Actually, Vivian, you might want to stay, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. This concerns real estate. Your professional insights might be valuable. Everyone froze. Rebecca's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Mom, what are you talking about? I took a deep breath. I've decided to sell this house. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum that seemed to suck all oxygen from the room. Greg recovered first, a disbelieving laugh escaping him. Sell the house? You can't sell the house. It's not yours to sell. Actually, it is. I turned to Rebecca. The deed has always remained in my name. I've paid the property taxes for 16 years. I've covered the insurance, the major repairs, and most of the utilities. Rebecca's face drained of color. That was the agreement. You bought it for us, for our family. I bought it to help you get on your feet, I corrected. A temporary arrangement that somehow became permanent without any discussion. Greg's expression hardened. So what? Now that we're comfortable, you're pulling the rug out from under us. Is this about the water gun? Because if Tyler upset you, this isn't about today, I interrupted. Though today certainly clarified things. This is about 16. Years of being treated like a convenience rather than a person. Rebecca stepped forward, her voice trembling with barely controlled anger. You're being ridiculous. We've given you a home, included you in our family, allowed you to be part of Tyler's life. Allowed? I repeated, the word like ice in my veins. This is my house. I've allowed you to live here, rent-free, while I cooked your meals, cleaned your messes, raised your child, and subsidized your lifestyle. Tyler's eyes were wide, darting between the adults. Greg noticed and put a hand on his shoulder. Buddy, why don't you go upstairs and try out that new video game? For once, Tyler didn't argue. He slipped off his stool and scurried toward the stairs, casting one confused glance back at me before disappearing. Once he was gone, Greg's facade of calm evaporated. What exactly are you trying to pull here, Emily? Some kind of power play? Because I've got to tell you, this isn't going to end well for anyone. I met his gaze steadily. I'm not pulling anything. I'm simply reclaiming what's mine, my property, my independence, my self-respect. Rebecca stepped closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. And what about Tyler? Have you thought about what this will do to him? You're his grandmother. He loves you. How could you even think about disrupting his life like this? I have thought about Tyler, I replied. I've thought about the lessons he's learning by watching how you treat me. Today, he saw everyone laugh when he doused me with water. What exactly do you think that teaches him about respect? Vivian shifted uncomfortably. I should really go. Stay, Rebecca commanded without looking at her. Mom's clearly having some kind of episode. She can't actually sell this house. There must be some agreement, some understanding. There is no legal agreement, I said firmly. Just a verbal arrangement that's been exploited for far too long. Greg's face flushed, dark red. Exploited? We've given you a place to live, a purpose, a family. I had those things before you, I cut in. And I'll have them after. After? Rebecca's voice rose sharply. After what? Where exactly do you think you're going to go? You're 70 years old, Mom. You haven't worked in nearly 2 decades. What's your plan? Move into some depressing senior apartment and live off Social Security? I almost laughed at how completely she had underestimated me, how thoroughly she had convinced herself of my dependence. Actually, I said calmly, I've accepted a position as lifestyle director at Monarch Heights. I've been working there part-time for the past 3 years. I've also purchased an apartment in the complex. I move in next month. Rebecca's jaw literally dropped. Greg stared as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. Even Vivian looked stunned. That's impossible, Rebecca finally sputtered. You've been here taking care of Tyler, managing the house. Not every day, I pointed out. Those book clubs and volunteer commitments you never asked about? That's where I've been, building my future while you assumed I had none. Greg recovered enough to attempt a different approach. Emily, be reasonable. You can't just upend everyone's lives because you're feeling underappreciated. Let's sit down, talk about this properly. I've tried talking for years, I replied. No one was interested in listening. Now I'm done talking. I'm acting. Rebecca's shock transformed into something harder, more calculated. So that's it. You're just going to abandon your family, sell our home out from under us, because your feelings got hurt at a children's birthday party? I'm not abandoning anyone, I said. I'm prioritizing myself for the first time in 16 years. Tyler will always be my grandson. You will always be my daughter. But this? I gestured around. The kitchen. This arrangement is over. You can't do this, Greg insisted, his voice rising. We have rights. As tenants, perhaps, I acknowledged. which is why I'll be providing the legally required notice period before listing the property. My lawyer will be in touch with the specifics. Rebecca stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. If you do this, if you actually go through with this insanity, you'll never see Tyler again. I promise you that. The threat sliced through me, sharp and painful, but I held my ground. That would be your choice. Just remember, he'll eventually be old enough to ask questions about why his grandmother disappeared from his life. Ask yourself, what answers you're prepared to give him. For a moment, no one spoke. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, counting down seconds of an era that was rapidly ending. Finally, I turned to Vivian, whose expression reflected equal parts discomfort and fascination. As a real estate professional, you understand. Property rights. This house is legally mine to sell. I hope you'll advise my daughter accordingly. Vivian cleared her throat. I should really stay out of family matters. Wise decision, I agreed. I'll be packing my things tonight. I'll stay with Margaret until the Monarch Heights apartment is ready. As I turned to leave, Rebecca's voice stopped me. Mom. Her tone had changed, softened with a hint of desperation. Please, don't do this to us, to Tyler. We can work something out. I looked back at my daughter, truly looked at her, seeing both the woman she had become and the girl she had once been. I've spent years working things out for everyone else. This time I'm working things out for me. With that, I walked toward my suite to begin packing, leaving behind a kitchen full of stunned silence. The garden-level suite had never felt so confining as it did that night. What had once seemed like a cozy sanctuary now felt like a cell, the walls closing in with each item I removed from its place. I worked methodically, separating my life into categories: essentials for Margaret's house, items to be stored until my move to Monarch Heights, things to be donated or discarded. I was halfway through emptying my closet when a soft knock came at the door. I hesitated, bracing myself for another confrontation with Rebecca or Greg. Grandma? Tyler's small voice called. Are you in there? I set down the sweater I was folding and opened the door. Tyler stood in the hallway in his pajamas, clutching the stuffed elephant I'd given him when he was born. His eyes were red-rimmed, his lower lip trembling slightly. Mom and Dad are fighting, he said quietly. About you, about the house. I knelt to his level, my knees protesting against the hardwood floor. I'm sorry you had to hear that, sweetheart. Are you really leaving? His voice cracked on the last word, and my heart constricted painfully in my chest. Yes, I answered honestly. I'm going to live in a new place, a place that's mine. But this is your place, he insisted, gesturing around the suite. Your room. Your stuff. I guided him inside and sat him on the edge of my bed, taking a place beside him. Tyler, do you remember when we talked about how birds build nests, and then the baby birds grow up and build their own nests? He nodded solemnly. Well, I've been in this nest for a very long time, helping your mom and dad, helping you. But now I need to build my own nest again. Because I got you wet? Because we laughed? His lower lip trembled more visibly now. I didn't mean to make you sad, Grandma. I thought it was funny. I wrapped an arm around his thin shoulders. It wasn't just the water, Tyler. Sometimes grown-ups need to make big changes, even when those changes are hard. Will I still see you? Mom said. He stopped abruptly, looking down at his feet. What did Mom say? He fidgeted with his elephant's ear. She said you might go away and not come back, that you don't want to be a grandma anymore. I turned him, gently to face me. Tyler James Bennett, listen to me very carefully. I will always, always be your grandmother. Nothing will ever change that. Not where I live, not what happens between your mom and me. Nothing. Do you understand? He nodded, but uncertainty lingered in his eyes. But if you don't live here, How will we make cookies on Saturdays? Or play chess? Or watch stars on the roof? Each question was a small dagger to my heart. These rituals, these simple, precious moments, had been the reward for all the sacrifices, the bright spots that made the arrangement bearable. We'll find new ways, I promised. Different ways, but still special. And you can visit me at my new place. It has a community kitchen where we can bake, and gardens where we can look at stars. Will I have my own room there? Like I do here? The odd question revealed so much. His assumption that any home of mine would naturally include space dedicated to him, just as this house had been entirely arranged around his family's needs. You'll always have a place with me, I said carefully. It might not be exactly the same, but it will be yours. He seemed to consider this, his small face scrunched in concentration. Finally, he asked, "Can I help you pack?" I smiled, relieved by the simple, practical request. Of course, you can help me decide which books to take first. We spent the next hour sorting through my modest library, Tyler solemnly categorizing books into piles based on his own inscrutable system. He insisted I take The Velveteen Rabbit immediately, because it's about being real, and carefully wrapped my fragile illustrated copy of A Midsummer Night's Dream in one of my scarves. As we worked, I heard Rebecca and Greg's voices rise and fall in the kitchen above us, words occasionally breaking through the ceiling. Unreasonable, ungrateful, impossible. And once, Rebecca's voice cracking as she shouted, "She's punishing us!" Tyler pretended not to hear, concentrating fiercely on his task, but I saw his shoulders tense with each elevated exchange. When the clock neared 9, I gently suggested it was time for bed. "Your mom will be wondering where you are." "Can't I stay here tonight?" he pleaded. "In your room, like when I was little and had bad dreams?" I hesitated, torn between my desire to comfort him and my determination to maintain boundaries. "Not tonight, sweetheart, but I'll walk you upstairs." We ascended the stairs hand in hand, Tyler clutching his elephant with his free arm. The voices from the kitchen fell silent as we reached the main level. Rebecca appeared in the hallway, her face tight with strain. "Tyler, there you are! It's past your bedtime!" Her tone was controlled, but I could hear the effort it cost her. "Grandma was showing me her books," Tyler explained. "I was helping her pack." Rebecca's expression flickered, hurt, anger, resentment, cycling rapidly before settling into a forced smile. "That was kind of you? Say goodnight now. It's time for bed." Tyler wrapped his arms around my waist in a fierce hug. "Don't leave before I wake up," he whispered. "Promise?" "I promise," I whispered. Back. "Good night, sweetheart." He reluctantly released me and trudged toward the stairs, casting one last glance over his shoulder before disappearing to the upper level. Rebecca and I stood in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice low enough that Tyler couldn't overhear. "Margaret called. She said you're staying with her." I nodded. "Just until the Monarch Heights apartment is ready." "So, you're really going through with this?" It wasn't a question. "Yes." She crossed her arms tightly, as if physically holding herself together. "Greg called his cousin. He's a real estate attorney. He says we might have claimed the house through adverse possession or an implied contract. I wasn't surprised they were already looking for legal loopholes. He's welcome to explore those options. My attorney is prepared for that discussion." Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. "God, listen. To us. Attorneys? Legal claims? How did we get here, Mom?" "One small erosion at a time," I answered quietly. "Day by day, year by year, until I couldn't recognize myself anymore." She looked away, blinking rapidly. "I never thought you were unhappy. You never said anything. Would you have listened if I had?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I'll be out by tomorrow afternoon," I said. "Margaret is coming with her SUV to help move the essentials." Rebecca nodded stiffly. "And the house?" I'll list it after giving you the proper notice period. You'll have time to find somewhere else. On our budget? In this neighborhood? With Tyler's school? Her voice rose again, edged with panic. Do you have any idea what rentals cost now? Or mortgages? I did know, of course. I'd been paying the property taxes as they steadily increased over the years. But I also knew that Rebecca and Greg's combined income was substantial. They chose to spend lavishly rather than save prudently. You're both successful professionals, I reminded her. You'll manage, just as I managed when your father died. And I had to support us alone. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's different. I was a child. And I've been treated like the hired help, I countered. Neither situation was ideal. Rebecca opened her mouth to argue further, then seemed to think better of it. Fine, we'll figure it out. We don't need your help. We never did. The words were meant to wound, and they did, but not in the way she intended. They simply confirmed what I already knew. In her narrative, my decades of support counted for nothing. Good night, Rebecca, I said, turning back toward my suite. Please tell Tyler I'll see him in the morning before I go. If you walk out that door tomorrow, she called after me, her voice quavering between threat and plea, you're choosing a fancy apartment over your family. I hope your independence keeps you warm at night. I paused but didn't turn around. I'm not choosing an apartment over family. I'm choosing myself after a lifetime of being chosen last. Or not at all. I continued down the hallway, her silence following me like a shadow. Back in my suite, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the dismantled framework of my sacrificial life, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not the quiet, hidden tears I'd become expert at concealing, but deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from the very core of my being. I cried for the years I'd lost, for the woman I'd allowed myself to become, for the relationship with my daughter that might never recover, for Tyler caught in the middle of adult failures. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen, until the well of grief seemed finally, mercifully empty. When the tears subsided, I washed my face with cool water and continued packing, my movements more decisive now. Each item I placed in a box felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. By midnight, the essentials were packed, my car loaded with what would fit, the rest organized for Margaret's arrival the next day. I lay in bed, staring at the unfamiliar landscape of my partially dismantled room. The house above me had gone quiet. Tomorrow would bring more confrontation, more pain, more difficult transitions. But for the first time in 16 years, the future stretching before me was truly mine to shape. I'd been at Margaret's house for 3 days when the social media storm began. I might have missed it entirely, if not for Joanne Levy, my attorney, who called early Thursday morning with concern in her voice. Emily, have you seen Rebecca's Facebook post? I hadn't. Social media had never been my domain, though I maintained minimal accounts to see family photos. Margaret, however, was more connected. At my request, she pulled up Rebecca's profile on her tablet. The post had been shared over 200 times already. Sometimes the people you trust most betray you in ways you never imagined. After 16 years of living in our family home, my 70-year-old mother has decided to evict us, her own daughter, son-in-law, and 8-year-old grandson, to pursue her independence. This house has been Tyler's only home, where every birthday and Christmas has been celebrated. Now we have 60 days to find somewhere new in this impossible housing market, all because a miscommunication at a child's birthday party triggered her vendetta. Elder care, family crisis, heartbroken. The post included a photo of Tyler on the front. Steps of the house, looking forlorn, clutching his stuffed elephant. The comments section overflowed with outrage on Rebecca's behalf. What kind of grandmother does this to her own flesh and blood? Sounds like dementia. Has she been evaluated? You need to fight this legally. She can't just take your home away. This is why I have my mother in assisted living. Can't trust seniors with important decisions. I set the tablet down, my hands trembling slightly. She's painting me as senile, as vindictive. Margaret's mouth was set in a grim line. She's rewriting history, making herself the victim. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor Helen. Just saw Rebecca's post. Are you okay? This doesn't sound like you at all. Then another from my former book club member Diane. Is everything all right? Rebecca's post has us all worried about you. The narrative was spreading rapidly, shaping public perception before I could even respond. By afternoon, several of Rebecca's real estate colleagues had shared the post, adding their own expressions of support and outrage. Greg's brother Michael posted a lengthy comment describing how I had suddenly changed and become erratic at Tyler's party. Vivian Chen, to her credit, remained silent on the matter. Joanne urged me to avoid responding publicly. This is an emotional reaction to being caught off guard, she explained. Engaging will only escalate the situation and create evidence that could complicate matters, I agreed reluctantly, though the temptation to defend myself was strong. Instead, I focused on the legal process, finalizing paperwork, and sending the official notice through certified mail. 2 days later, Greg escalated the battle. He posted a video of Tyler in his baseball uniform, tearfully explaining to his coach why he might miss the upcoming season. My grandma is making us move away and Mom says we can't afford baseball anymore. The video was clearly staged, with Greg's voice audible in the background prompting Tyler with questions. But the emotional impact was undeniable. A child's activities threatened by a grandmother's selfishness. The comments were predictably vicious, with several suggesting I must be suffering from mental decline. Margaret was incensed. This is manipulative and exploitative. They're using that child as a weapon. I felt sick watching Tyler's confusion and distress, knowing he was being positioned against me. He doesn't understand what's happening. They're making him think I'm taking everything away. Which is exactly why you need to speak up, Margaret argued. Not on social media, but to Tyler directly. I hesitated. Rebecca made it clear she doesn't want me contacting him. Since when do grandmothers need permission to love their grandchildren? Margaret challenged. Call him. Today. Rebecca didn't answer when I called, nor did Greg. After 3 attempts, I tried the home landline during a time I knew Tyler would be back from school. To my surprise, he answered. Tyler? It's Grandma. Grandma! His voice immediately brightened. Mom said you weren't talking to us anymore. My heart clenched. That's not true, sweetheart. I've been trying to call you. When are you coming home? My plant is dying. I think I'm watering it too much. The simplicity of his concern, his wilting science project rather than the family upheaval, was somehow both heartbreaking and hopeful. Children are remarkably resilient, focusing on immediate, concrete problems rather than adult complexities. Tyler, listen, I said gently. I'm not coming back to live there, but that doesn't mean I'm not still your grandmother. I love you very much, and nothing will ever change that. Dad says we have to move because you're selling our house. He says we might have to live in an apartment without a yard. I chose my words carefully. Changes can be scary, but sometimes they help us grow in new ways. Remember when you were afraid of starting 2nd grade, but then you met your best friend Jamie? Yeah, he admitted, but I still had my room and my stuff. And you'll still have those things, just in a different place. And you'll still have me, even though I'll be in a different place too. I heard Rebecca's voice in the background suddenly. Tyler? Who are you talking to? It's Grandma, he said, his voice moving away from the receiver. There was a muffled exchange, then Rebecca came on the line, her voice cold. Don't call here again. If you want to communicate with Tyler, have your lawyer contact ours. The line went dead. That night, a new post appeared on Rebecca's Facebook page, a family photo from Christmas last year, strategically cropped to remove me despite the fact that I had been standing right beside them when it was taken. The caption read, "Focusing on what matters most, family above all. Lost her, stay strong together." The external battle for narrative control was in full swing, and I was clearly losing. But unlike before, I now understood that winning public opinion wasn't what mattered. The only audience I truly cared about was an 8-year-old boy who deserved better from all the adults in his life, myself included. 1 week after my departure from the colonial house, I received an unexpected visitor at Margaret's home. The doorbell rang just after 9 in the morning. Margaret was at her yoga class, so I answered, expecting a package delivery. Instead, I found Vivian Chen standing on the porch, immaculately dressed in a business suit, her expression uncomfortable but determined. "Mrs. Winters," she said formally. "I apologize for the intrusion. May I speak with you?" Curiosity overcame my wariness. I invited her in, leading her to Margaret's sunroom where morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Rebecca doesn't know I'm here," Vivian said, once we were seated. In fact, she'd probably fire me if she knew. "Then why risk it?" I asked. Vivian placed a folder on the coffee table between us. "Because what they're doing isn't right, and because I've been in your position." She explained that her ex-husband had done something similar years ago, using their son as leverage in their divorce, portraying her as unstable on social media, turning family friends against her. "It took me years to rebuild my reputation," she said. "Years I couldn't get back, with my son. I can't sit by and watch it happen to someone else." She slid the folder toward me. "These are documents Rebecca asked me to notarize. Statements claiming you've shown signs of cognitive decline, that you've been financially irresponsible, that you've verbally abused Tyler. She plans to use them to contest the house sale on grounds of your mental incompetence." My hands trembled as I reviewed the papers, a calculated, systematic attempt to discredit me as both a property owner and a grandmother. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because it's wrong," Vivian stated simply, "and because you should know what you're facing." After she left, I called Joanne immediately. She wasn't surprised. "It's a common tactic when older individuals assert independence," she explained. "Family members claim cognitive impairment to maintain control of assets. We'll need to get ahead of this." The next day, I underwent a comprehensive cognitive assessment with a respected geriatric physician. The results were unequivocal. I was not only mentally sound, but functioning at a level typically seen in individuals a decade younger. Armed with medical documentation and Vivian's evidence of Rebecca's planned strategy, I made a difficult decision. I wouldn't fight this battle on social media, but I would fight it directly and decisively. I scheduled a meeting at Joanne's office and insisted that Rebecca and Greg attend with their attorney. To ensure transparency, I also invited Stephen Zhao from Monarch Heights and Dr. Eleanor Phillips, the physician who had conducted my assessment. When Rebecca and Greg arrived with their lawyer, an aggressive-looking man with an expensive suit, and skeptical eyes, they faltered momentarily at finding the additional attendees. "What is this?" Rebecca demanded. "Some kind of ambush?" "This," I replied calmly, "is me reclaiming my narrative." For the next hour, I systematically dismantled their strategy. Dr. Phillips presented her findings on my cognitive health. Stephen confirmed my employment history and financial standing. Joanne outlined the clear legal ownership of the property, including 16 years of tax payments from my accounts. Finally, I revealed copies of the documents Vivian had provided, watching Rebecca's face pale with recognition. "You intended to declare me incompetent," I stated, my voice steady despite the hurt beneath it. "Your own mother." Their attorney shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing the case was weaker than his clients had suggested. "We have options here," Joanne interjected. "None of these documents have been filed. No irreversible damage has been done, yet. Mrs. Winters is willing to discuss reasonable transition arrangements for your family, providing you cease all attempts to discredit her and ensure appropriate access to her grandson. Rebecca and Greg exchanged glances, the realization dawning that their position had crumbled entirely. "What kind of arrangements?" Greg finally asked. As we began negotiations, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since this ordeal began, I wasn't defending myself against accusations or fighting for validation. I was simply standing firmly in my truth, reclaiming authority over my own life's narrative. The agreement we reached was straightforward. I would extend their residence period to 90 days instead of 60, providing more time to find suitable housing. In exchange, they would cease all defamatory social media posts, issue a public clarification about the property ownership, and ensure regular contact between Tyler and me. 2 weeks after the meeting, we gathered at Joanne's office to sign the formal documents. The atmosphere was tense but controlled, professionals handling necessary business rather than family addressing an emotional rupture. Rebecca signed her name without meeting my eyes, her signature sharp and angular across the paper. Greg followed. Suit, his manner resigned but practical. I signed last, my hand surprisingly steady despite the finality of the moment. "That concludes our official business," Joanne announced, collecting the papers. "Mrs. Winters has arranged for the property to be listed after the 90-day period, with showings coordinated around your schedule for minimal disruption." Rebecca nodded stiffly. She had dressed formally for the occasion, her power suit, perfect. Makeup, not a hair out of place. Armor against vulnerability. As we prepared to leave, I touched her arm lightly. "Rebecca, could we speak privately for a moment?" She hesitated, then gave a curt nod. We stepped into a small conference room adjacent to Joanne's office, the door closing softly behind us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us like a physical barrier. Years of unspoken resentments and misunderstandings solidified into something almost tangible. "I never wanted it to come to this," I finally said. Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. "Then why did you do it? If you were unhappy, why didn't you just talk to us?" I tried, in 100 small ways. But somewhere along the line, you stopped. Seeing me as a person with needs and started seeing me as a resource. She looked away, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "You could have said something directly. Would you have listened? Really listened?" Her silence was answer enough. "I'm not selling the house to punish you," I continued gently. "I'm selling it because holding on to it means holding on to a role that's destroying me." "What about Tyler?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He misses you." "I'm still here," I replied. "I've always been here. The question is whether you'll allow me to be his grandmother without being your housekeeper." Something shifted in her expression, not quite acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "He has a baseball game this Saturday. You should come." It wasn't an apology or a reconciliation, but it was an opening. A small crack in the wall between us. As we left Joanne's office, stepping into the bright spring sunshine, I felt a curious mixture of sadness and liberation. The official papers had transformed the colonial house from a home back into a property, a transition that mirrored my own journey from family caretaker to independent woman. Greg waited by their car, keys in hand, his expression carefully neutral. "All set?" Rebecca nodded. "Mom's coming to Tyler's game on Saturday." His eyebrows rose slightly, but he simply said, "Good. He'll be happy about that." We parted with awkward nods rather than embraces, the physical distance between us reflecting the emotional landscape we now navigated. As I watched them drive away, I realized we were all entering uncharted territory. For 16 years, our relationship had been defined by proximity and practicality, by who did what for whom under a shared roof. Now we would have to learn who we were to each other without those parameters. What remained when obligation was removed from the equation? It was terrifying and necessary in equal measure. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Tyler in his baseball uniform, grinning widely, with a simple caption, "Can't wait to see you Saturday, Grandma. I'm playing second base." Rebecca must have given him her old phone, the one she'd replaced last year after upgrading. Saved the number immediately and replied, "I'll be there cheering the loudest. Save some home runs for me." It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning, a first step toward a relationship built on choice rather than circumstance. With the agreement signed and boundaries established, I turned my attention to the practical aspects of my new life. The proceeds from the house sale would substantially increase my financial security, but more immediately, I needed to redistribute the physical and emotional resources I'd invested in Rebecca's family. I began with my time, the most precious resource I'd consistently given away. My position at Monarch Heights shifted from part-time to full-time as we approached the grand opening. I threw myself into finalizing program calendars, coordinating with local artists for the resident workshop series, and selecting furnishings for the community spaces. "You've completely transformed since our first meeting," Stephen remarked one afternoon as we reviewed the demonstration kitchen layout. "There's a confidence in your decisions now." I smiled, recognizing the truth in his observation. "I'm not asking permission anymore." Next came my physical possessions. Margaret helped me methodically sort through everything I'd stored in her guest room. We created 3 distinct categories: items for my new apartment, keepsakes worth preserving, and things to release entirely. The process was surprisingly liberating. Crystal serving platters I'd maintained for hosting family holidays, donated to a women's shelter. The expensive china Rebecca had always insisted we use for special occasions that somehow included every dinner party she hosted but never my birthday, sold to a consignment shop. "What about this?" Margaret asked, holding up the handcrafted quilt that had adorned Tyler's bed since infancy, my painstaking creation featuring baseball motifs and his name embroidered in the corner. I touched the fabric gently. "That stays with Tyler. Some gifts should remain gifts, regardless of circumstances." The most significant redistribution, however, was financial. The meeting with my financial advisor, Martin Chen, coincidentally Vivian's cousin, transformed my perspective on the years ahead. "Based on your pension, Social Security, upcoming salary, and the projected proceeds from the house sale, you're in an excellent position," Martin explained, showing me projections that stretched well into my 90s. "You can live quite comfortably at Monarch Heights while still building a legacy." "Legacy?" I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. I'd spent so many years in survival mode that planning beyond immediate needs seemed almost indulgent. Martin smiled. "Many of my clients at your stage want to create something lasting. Education funds for grandchildren, charitable foundations aligned with their values, meaningful contributions to their communities." That evening, I sat on Margaret's patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Legacy. The concept circled in my mind, expanding with possibility. For decades, I'd defined my worth through service to others, particularly my family. I'd measured my success by their comfort, their convenience, their achievements. What would it mean to measure it differently, by impact rather than sacrifice? The next morning, I made 3 significant decisions. First, I established a dedicated education fund for Tyler, not controlled by Rebecca and Greg, but structured as a trust that would be available for his college expenses regardless of our evolving family dynamics. Second, I created a modest annual travel budget for myself, beginning with a 2-week culinary tour of northern Italy scheduled for the fall. The cooking techniques I'd learn would enhance the programs at Monarch Heights, But more importantly, they would fulfill a personal dream I'd deferred for too long. Third, I contacted the community college where I'd once taken architectural drafting courses and inquired about establishing a scholarship for women returning to education after significant life interruptions. The financial aid officer was enthusiastic, explaining that even a relatively small endowment could help several women annually with books, childcare, and transportation, often the invisible barriers to education. We could name it the Emily Winter's Second Chapter Scholarship, she suggested. Your story might inspire others to take that leap. My story. My name. My values reflected in resource allocation rather than resource depletion. As I signed the necessary paperwork, I realized I was redistributing more than money. I was redistributing agency. Each deliberate choice about how to allocate my resources was an act of reclaiming authority over my life, of acknowledging that my needs and values deserved expression. For the first time in decades, I wasn't stretching resources to accommodate others' priorities. I was directing them with intention, creating ripples that would extend beyond my daily existence into wider circles of impact. 6 months after Tyler's birthday party, I stood in the center of apartment C307 at Monarch Heights, morning sunlight streaming through east-facing windows, just as I'd imagined during those secret planning sessions. The moving company had finished, placing furniture according to my carefully designed floor plan. Books lined custom shelves, photography from my Italy trip adorned the walls, and a small desk overlooked the community gardens. This space, every inch of it, reflected my choices, my aesthetic, my priorities. The colonial house had sold quickly, once listed, fetching a price that exceeded expectations in the competitive market. Rebecca and Greg had found a townhouse in a neighboring community, smaller than they'd hoped, but still within Tyler's school district. Our communications remained formal but functional, centered primarily around arrangements for my time with Tyler. Those visits had evolved into a new tradition. Every other Saturday, Tyler came to Monarch Heights for what he'd dubbed Grandma adventures. Sometimes we baked in the demonstration kitchen, creating treats he proudly shared with my neighbors. Other days we explored the grounds, collecting interesting leaves or rocks for his science projects. Occasionally, we invited other residents' grandchildren to join us for art classes or board game tournaments. Your grandson is quite the diplomat, observed Eleanor, my neighbor from C312, after Tyler had refereed a surprisingly competitive Scrabble match between two former attorneys. He has your patience. I smiled, recognizing that what she observed wasn't inherited genetics, but modeled behavior. The quiet dignity I'd reclaimed and now practiced openly. My professional life flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. The lifestyle director role expanded as Monarch Heights gained recognition for innovative programming. I was invited to speak at senior living conferences about creating meaningful community engagement. Articles featuring our initiatives appeared in industry publications, sometimes accompanied by photographs of me, silver-haired, confidently gesturing, visibly in my element. Rebecca saw one such article in a real estate magazine. She texted, a brief message. You look happy. Tyler's proud his grandma is famous. These small acknowledgments, never quite apologies but recognitions nonetheless, formed a tenuous bridge between us. Not the fusion of lives we'd once had, but a connection maintained across necessary distance. One unseasonably warm October afternoon, I hosted a gathering in the Monarch Heights Community Garden. The Emily Winter's Second Chapter Scholarship had selected its first 3 recipients, and we were celebrating with a small ceremony. Margaret was there, beaming with sisterly pride. Stephen and Elaine attended, along with several residents who'd become friends rather than merely neighbors. To my surprise, Rebecca arrived just as the ceremony began, slipping quietly into a seat at the back. Tyler, beside her, waved enthusiastically as I introduced the scholarship recipients, women in their 50s and 60s returning to education with dreams long deferred. I caught Rebecca watching me intently. Perhaps she was seeing me clearly for the first time in years, not as mother-grandmother helper, but as a woman in her own right, creating impact beyond family roles. After the ceremony, as guests mingled over refreshments, Tyler bounded over with his usual energy. "Grandma, I made the travel board for your Italy pictures. Can I see your apartment now?" Rebecca followed more slowly. "If that's okay with you," she added, a note of uncertainty in her voice. "He's been talking about your place nonstop, but we don't want to intrude." "You're both welcome," I replied, meaning it sincerely. As I led them to C307, I observed Rebecca taking in the community, the thoughtfully designed spaces, the evident quality, the atmosphere of engagement rather than retirement. Inside my apartment, Tyler immediately gravitated to the collection of Italian cooking implements displayed on open shelving. "You really went to Italy, just like you said you would." Rebecca wandered to the windows, gazing at the meticulously maintained gardens below. "This is beautiful, Mom. You've created something wonderful here." "I have," I agreed simply. She turned, her expression complicated with emotions I couldn't fully decode. "I still don't understand why you had to leave the way you did. Why you couldn't have talked to us first." "Would you have listened?" "Really listened?" I asked. The same question I'd posed months earlier in Joanne's office. This time, however, Rebecca answered differently. "I don't know," she admitted. "Probably not. We were so used to you being there, exactly as you'd always been. We never imagined you wanted something else." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. The beginning of something like understanding. As they prepared to leave, Tyler hugged me fiercely. "See you Saturday, Grandma. We're making pizza, remember?" "I remember," I assured him. "I've already ordered the special flour." Rebecca hesitated at the door. "You know, Mom, he threw water at me last week with that same water gun." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" A small, rueful smile curved her lips. "And I finally understood why you left. Some moments clarify everything." After they departed, I made a cup of tea and settled into my favorite chair by the window. Below, residents strolled through gardens tinged with autumn colors. Above, the sky stretched endlessly blue. Inside this home that was entirely mine, I felt the quiet contentment of a woman who had finally become visible, to herself, most of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.